The following is a sponsored program. The opinions presented during this show may not necessarily represent those of Journal Broadcast Group. Your host is Dan Worthen, a financial advisor with offices at 8516 East 101st Street, Suite C in Tulsa. His office phone number is 918-398-8387. Dan is a branch manager with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Now, here's Money Talk.
Welcome to Money Talk, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dan Worthen, your host and branch manager with LPL Financial. Joining me today in the studio is Steve Money to my right, JC Haspel to my left, and across the table from me, a very special guest, Ms. Linda Murphy, is here to talk about Common Core and how it will affect you, your children, and your grandchildren. We're going to talk about that later in the show. I want to welcome her to the show, though. Do you want to take a quick moment and introduce Linda before we go? I know we don't have a lot of time before the break, but go ahead and take a moment to introduce Linda.
A very important topic today in Oklahoma and around the country is Common Core, the dumbing down of children, because they're easier to control that way. And we have a very special guest today, Linda Murphy, and I think after the break, after the break, Linda's going to inform us about Common Core, the good, the bad, the ugly, who's for it, who's against it, and what you can do to influence your own children's education.
Very good. Linda, we've got about 1 minute here of airtime, but can you take about a minute and give us a quick background on who you are just before we go to break?
Hi, I'm glad to be here today, Linda Murphy, and I was in Governor Keating's office as education advisor. After I ran statewide for state school superintendent across the state of Oklahoma, I received 49.5% of the vote statewide, and one of the major issues at that time was outcomes-based education, which is really this revamped. We have Common Core is the same as OBE.
Yeah. Exactly. Who's a proponent of that? Let me guess, OEA or NEA?
Yes, NEA signed off on it, and we have a lot of big corporate funding and foundations that would like to have controlled curriculum and testing of students, and now we have a lot of high-stakes testing that go along with it.
And I'm trying to figure out what the end game is here for them. Aside from, I can understand the union's perspective because the union benefits from this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because, okay, never mind. She's telling me I got to go to break. So we better take a quick break. More with Linda Murphy after the break. Welcome back to Money Talk, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dan Worthen, along with Steve Money and JC Haspel and Linda Murphy here in the studio to talk about Common Core today. And if you'd like, we will also send you this little piece that we've got from Linda about some Common Core town hall meetings coming up. I think, is that okay if we send these out?
Thank you.
And I'm sure she'd like for us to send these out. We'll send these out along with the information to you. It's all free. Just give me a call at 398-8387. That's 398-8387. Just leave your name and address. When you get our voicemail, it is the weekend, so you will get our voicemail. And just leave us your name and address. We'll send you the book, the reports, and the information on Common Core town hall meetings, how you can find out more about this controversial and very important subject. So without further ado, Steve, would you like to
Linda,
interrogate Linda here?
Let's turn the light on and the light bulb and get the rubber hose out here.
All right.
Linda, I will tell you where I first became probably a little more aware of Common Core. I went to a particular lunch that I go to every month, and they played this video, and it was a teacher or somebody, and it was saying, if you ask the kid what's 4 times 3 and they say 11, that's okay. We just want to know how they feel about it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Okay, that's what woke me up, and that's what got my interest in this. I'm assuming you've seen that video.
Yes.
What's the story on that? I mean, is that a good summary of what Common Core is about, as long as you feel good about your answer?
Well, that is a part of it. Now, when we had outcomes-based education back in the 90s, there was a lot of what we call the affective domain, the emotions and feelings of students integrated into the standards. This has some of that, but most of it is more sold or marketed as higher order thinking skills. But what happens in math is the student can't just write the answer to 23 plus 52. They have to work out a process in a regimented, step-by-step procedure that takes a long time on each answer. So they're really looking at the process, not just the answer. So we have young children who are not learning to quickly calculate. In their mind, 2 plus 2 is 4, 5 plus 9 is 14. They can't do that quickly with this process. They have to work the process out on paper. And what a lot of it is doing, Steve, is lining up to align with the testing system that we're going to get next year that will align with the standards that we already have in the classroom. The testing will require students to do processing in math. It will require them to read instructional materials, even in first grade. At least half of the time has to be spent reading dry instructional information.
Wow.
First graders learning to read are not interested.
Now this brings to mind another issue that I want to ask about before I forget. I grew up in Ohio, Northern Ohio, and I went to a private school.
Mm-hmm.
My graduating class was probably about 100 students. It was a small school. But 100% of my graduating class went to college. Mm-hmm. Every single student in my class went to college. I got admitted to every college that I applied to. It was a good school. It was a very good school. It was a private school, which really, it may or may not be germane to this. I'm not sure. But what I'm trying to say here is that competition among schools is a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Yes.
Common Core essentially reduces that competition among schools and tries to put everybody at the same level, which is not necessarily a good thing.
Exactly.
You know, and the 10th Amendment is there for a reason. We have competition among states, for people, for businesses, for whatever. Mm-hmm. How do you think this will affect competition among the schools, among like the Tulsa Public Schools versus Jenks, let's say right now?
Exactly.
Jenks probably has higher test scores than Tulsa Public Schools, I'm guessing, and I'm not for sure of this, but I'm guessing that. And so Jenks draws people to live there.
Probably Okarche has better.
Well, they're running
test
circles
scores
around everybody.
than Tulsa Public
We
Schools.
know they do.
Yeah,
they have the highest
I was
test
trying to
scores
be
in the
kind
state,
about
by
it.
the way.
Exactly.
At least they did last time I looked.
Okarche
Yeah.
has better schools than Tulsa.
There are a number of things that come to mind with this as far as how it affects the difference between schools and the competition that we have, that we want to have. What Arne Duncan, Secretary of Education on the federal level under Obama, said recently was that white suburban moms are upset and angry because their children aren't as smart as they thought they were. Under this Common Core system, students are making poor grades, and he does not want a difference between the suburbs, the inner city. This is an equalizing plan. We're going from equal opportunity to learn to equal outcomes.
And there's a big difference in the two.
A big difference.
It's not, and you're right, because our lifestyle here in our Constitution does not guarantee equal outcomes. It guarantees equal opportunity.
Exactly.
And some in our current administration have forgotten that fact, I think, in Washington at least.
Well, if we're going to try to equalize things, it seems to me it would be better if we equalize by raising everybody, not lowering everybody. But, man, I grew up in Muskogee. What do I know?
Well, equal opportunity, in the past, everyone thinks when you talk about improving standards, you're going to have better academic standards. But no, this is a political worldview integrated into a set of standards, and the testing is coming that aligns with that teachers will lose their job if the students don't pass it. The students will not be passed on to the next grade if they don't pass the test. And the schools are now being graded with an A to F report card,
right.
And part of that will be based on the student testing, a big part.
As a football coach, you're only as good as your players.
Yes.
And you get judged by how your players play.
Right.
As a teacher, I would be scared to death if my future, my security depended on a bunch of kids who the schools and the teachers have really no authority to control.
Right.
The system discourages controlling them because we all want them to feel good.
Yes.
I don't know how that works. I got to go back to the math thing.
Yes.
Because I'm incredibly numerically dyslexic. But, when I was in first grade, we used clay tablets and sharp sticks. That's how long ago this has been, all right? But you would get a row of math questions, all addition, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Well, under a Common Core, how do you answer that if you just have a bunch of numbers there and you're just supposed to give the answer? There wasn't room for me to express my feelings about how I got there.
Exactly. Or your mental process that is a 20-step conclusion. So what we have are a lot of things eliminated that teachers have used traditionally.
Like math?
Real math, let's just say. Exactly. The joy of learning to read and appreciating literature, when you cut half of it out, starting in first grade, by the time they get to high school, it's supposed to be 70% instructional, 30% literature. So we're talking about Western civilization, historical knowledge that you get through good classic literature. There are many reasons we read besides being able to read.
Well, I work in the financial arena, which is normally what my show's about.
So how good are you at numbers?
But
if
yeah,
you're in that
the
business?
thing is, that's what I'm going to ask. If I've got a prospective
Yes.
person coming into my office who wants to be a broker, or do what I do, financial advisor, whatever you want to call them, and they can't add 5 and 3, they're not much use to me.
No.
And if I'm sitting on the space shuttle and I'm hoping to hit the moon,
right.
I really don't want the guy that doesn't do math.
Exactly.
Figuring my trajectory to the moon and doesn't do physics.
And they did that with a slide rule, by
right.
the way.
They did it back then by hand and with slide rules. They didn't have the computer power that we have today, obviously. But I really don't want the guy that doesn't know how to do 4 times 3.
Exactly.
Figuring out where my spaceship is going
right.
and where I'm going to end up, because I'm going to end up somewhere around Saturn probably if I'm aiming for the moon.
And even
gets it
basic
wrong.
skills, as you know, for grocery store, service station, whatever.
Well, and I have to, with my job, I have to do math in my head. Contrary to what it seems like on the air, I do it in my head, and I have to do it frequently because we have to be able to figure out percentages, multiplication, and simple addition and subtraction in our head. It's just part of the job.
Exactly.
And we don't have time to pull out a calculator every time and
Right.
make this decision or do that. We have to do it in our head. And those are skills we need. And
Exactly.
when I went to school, they drilled us on those things. We have to have
Yes.
the flashcards and stuff like
the
that.
flashcards,
And
absolutely.
we memorized that stuff,
Yep.
and we competed in those areas.
Exactly.
And I
You
didn't
want
have a problem
quick,
with it.
automatic. It should be an automatic foundational skill.
Right, and I hate to admit that the more we rely on calculators and our iPhones and things like that, the more we get away from these skills.
Right.
But I still have the basic skills to do math in my head. I can still do
Yes.
5 times 3 or 50 times 3, whatever it might be. In my
Exactly.
head, I can figure out percentage very quickly in my head. Granted, I use it every day, and not everybody does, but I just don't. I fail to see where we're creating this lack of competition, how it's going to help us. It may create less stress, for Johnny or Susie who's in school because they don't feel the pressure to get an A. But you know what? It doesn't bother me. Stress is part of our lives. Competition is part of our lives. And if you look at the Soviet Union model, which had no competition, we all know how that ended. It didn't end well for them. It ended in shambles, is what it ended up as. And whereas we have the American model where there's competition, it's so far going a lot better. Let's put it that way. I just don't see why do we have companies like these big entities backing Common Core?
I don't think they know what it is. I don't think a lot of them know what it is, but the idea that is behind it, of course, financially, is if workers are prepared with great skills coming out at the end of the process, then these students are going to be ready to go to work and plug into the corporate training at the level that they want. That's what they're being sold. That's not what they're going to get.
Right. And the problem I have is if I got a student who, went to, let's say, Cassia Hall, and let's say Cassia Hall says Common Core, no, sorry, we're not going to play that game. We're not going to go down that road, which I assume is probably what they're going to do. And then I have a student who goes to TPS. You know which one I'm going to hire?
Exactly.
I can tell you, it's not a tough decision for me which one to hire. It's going to be the one from Cassia Hall. Because he's got a better education. I'm assuming, at the end of the day, I'm assuming that he can do the skills that I need him to be able to do. And so all I see here is that the public sector, public education sector is putting themselves at further disadvantage vis-a-vis the private sector, the private schools, which means you're going to create a higher demand for private schools, which means if vouchers ever come out, they're going to get decimated. The public system is going to get decimated. Am I right?
Well, the problem is a lot of the people in private systems are also going to this, and we have a lot of corporations that are running for-profit charters. And if state laws are set up in a certain way, they really have an advantage to go in and compete against what might be a good locally controlled and locally initiated charter. Private Christian school, private school of any kind.
Right.
Locally, what we're used to thinking about as a charter or an option in a private school, what we're seeing happen nationally are big for-profit corporations.
Okay. I've got to take a quick break, but I want to remind our listeners of our free book, Control, Exposing the Truth About Guns by Glenn Beck. We will send you a free copy of this, plus information on how to go to a Common Core town hall meeting that Linda Murphy's going to be at, and speak at, along with Dr. Everett Piper. And it's all free. Just give me a call at 918-398-8387, 918-398-8387. We'll be back with more from Linda Murphy. Steve? Fire away.
Okay, so we're here with Linda Murphy, former Secretary of Education for Oklahoma, so well qualified to talk about this. Linda, how does this? We were talking during the break about homeschooling, and it didn't occur to me that I thought if you homeschooled, you could probably teach your kid whatever you wanted. You could teach them real American history, not the revised American history. But in the course of talking about that over the break, that would put a homeschool kid at a disadvantage. Taking the ACT or SATs, it sounds like.
Right. If this system gets implemented fully, the testing for entrance to college is being changed now to line up with Common Core. And if this gets implemented fully, it will affect private school, homeschool. Vouchers or charters will not make a difference. A lot of people who have supported charters, vouchers, parental choice in that sense see that we're going to get a choice, just like they said about the early Fords. You can have whatever car you want as long as it's black.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of going the opposite direction of a voucher system.
Yes.
I mean, to me, I see Common Core as the antithesis
Right, it is.
of that. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's kind of the way I see it going.
Well, you don't
And
need a voucher if every school teaches the same dumb stuff.
Doesn't matter.
What do you need a voucher for?
Right.
You
Well, if they don't teach anything,
you're going to be as
yeah.
ignorant at this school
Right.
as that school.
it's sad to think about. You know, our education system right now is at a disadvantage compared to many of the systems overseas. The Japanese, and I lived in South America. Steve's lived overseas. I've lived overseas. In South America, I lived in Chile. It was the country I lived in for a year down there. I was an exchange student back in high school. The school I went to, the students all spoke English, which was not their native tongue, obviously. Yeah. They also had to learn German. So they were speaking 3 languages by the time they came out of high school. How many languages do we have that are mandatory? Besides our own? I'm not even sure our own is mandatory here, quite frankly.
No, that's what I was going to say. I'm not even sure. Yeah,
we don't mandate that we don't mandate that we learn any foreign languages here in the U.S. Of course, the U.S. has this, I don't know how you isolationist view that we are the only language that matters in the world. And so we're behind as far as education goes versus the world. This is going to put us further behind, don't you think?
I know it will. There are too many things about this that are just the opposite of good education. And this is where we're seeing educators across the state, and I am an educator, by the way, you probably know that, but certified 25 years by the State Department of Ed, and people who have taught reading, who have taught math, not only our own experiences as an individual, but hundreds of students. This is going to be devastating to true education. Absolutely.
The foreign language thing, though, kind of brings up a question for me. Does Common Core get rid of all specialized classes? Like, for instance, if you can't have every kid going through calculus in high school. So
Right.
does every kid now, does no kid have the option of calculus in high school if you're good at math?
Is
there no foreign language?
Depends on how you feel.
The Common Core brings the top down on the top level classes. They'll be taken out.
So
And
like
the
AP
bottom
classes.
up.
Like
Exactly.
AP classes would probably just go away.
We're not there yet. And a lot of
Right.
people say, oh, we're not going to do that. Here's the argument from the side pushing this. And a lot of people in our state who have been, I'll say, indoctrinated or drank the Kool-Aid of marketing about this, believe that this is just a set of standards, and that's it. But the testing is going to drive the system because students won't pass. Teachers will not keep their job if the students don't pass. And the curriculum, when you look at it, that goes along, that matches the standards, that matches the testing, is narrowed, and it shuts down the top level and the bottom. There is no way to put everyone through a curriculum that has too much challenge on the top end. And there's no way to do it anyway because we still have the individual differences. I taught special ed. These kids have been required to sit under, I'm sorry to say, but President George Bush's No Child Left Behind testing. Special ed students who cannot pass tests have been required to sit at the table with a pencil with a certain amount of time. I directed testing. And the idea was we're not trying hard enough to get them through. But that really was not correct. In real life, that's not what was happening.
Right. I want to ask you a question about Kathy Taylor real quick.
Yes.
Before I forget. You mentioned before we started the show about the race to the top.
Yes.
And I know Kathy was a proponent and applied for those grants or whatever
Yes.
they were. Talk to us about that and what that was all about, if you would.
Sure will. I found a U.S. Chamber of Commerce newsletter that I have a copy of that is a commendation to the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce, the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, and the Oklahoma Chamber of Commerce for getting the Race to the Top grant in place. They said in the report that Kathy Taylor was funded by George Kaiser and that she was in Brad Henry's office to do this work of getting the Race to the Top grant in place. Phyllis Hudecki with the Oklahoma Business and OBEC, Oklahoma Business and Education Coalition, headed that up, and she was Mary Fallon's Secretary of Ed. So we can see very well why this has been endorsed by some of our officials on the top who don't realize what they've really bought into.
Something just popped into my head while you were saying that. Smaller school districts in Oklahoma, from what I've seen, have had better test scores than the bigger school districts.
Many of them do, yes.
Okay. Okarche Public Schools, we were talking about a while
Yes.
back. Okay, has really high test scores vis-a-vis Oklahoma.
Yes.
How do these districts feel about Common Core?
They do not like it. I find across the state, rurally, we probably have 90% of the people that are involved in implementing this that are rejecting it. There are some trying to hang on because the union has pushed it, and the PTA has been funded by Gates. The NEA has been funded by Gates. The Fordham Foundation, Chester Finn, who has been a so-called conservative spokesman for standards nationally, worked with a lot of our governors for years, has said that he supports Common Core, that he loves it. It's a great thing, but they are funded by Gates. So when you get back and look at the money behind it, they're buying into something that is not going to be what they want.
Well, the only beneficiaries I can see to this whole thing are the OEA and the NEA, and I've yet to see how anybody else really benefits. I can see why the OEA likes it, because it reduces the pressure on them, or the threshold that they have to meet to show that they're somehow that they're doing their job, whatever you want to call it, because they don't want merit pay. They don't want anything based on merit. Obviously, they want it based on tenure and longevity, and they're the only ones that I see as the winner in this whole thing. Am I wrong? Am I missing something here?
On the national level, here's what's happening. On the national level, NEA is at the table. They were in the table in the development of this Common Core. Now, when you get down to the state level, like a lot of big bureaucracies, you find people that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing.
Right.
So we're finding some state leaders and some local leaders that don't like it at all, but their national people have bought into this and put them into the shareholders, they call it, or stakeholders group.
This is a political topic, so let's talk politics for a minute. Who's for it? Who's against it? Because I'll tell you what got my attention, too, also, was when Huckabee came out for it.
Yes.
That surprised the fire out of me. Now, I think maybe am I right that he's backed up a little bit?
He backed up real quick, backpedaling, but didn't really put down the Common Core itself. He wanted to say no federal control, and there are some problems with some of the standards. He knew he was in trouble with his audience, obviously, because the uproar was coming to him. So on the national level, he has backpedaled. Unfortunately, some of the governors, when they get to the National Governors Association, which is a bipartisan organization of governors from Democrat and Republican Party, you get a lot of compromising, a lot of consensus building going on. And Huckabee was the chair of the NGA, as Bill Clinton was the chair. Now, our Governor, Mary Fallin, is the chair of the NGA. And unfortunately, she has bought into this concept, not knowing fully what the results are. Maybe, I don't know. I can't read her mind. I know Mary. I've known her for 20 years, Governor Fallin. When I ran for state superintendent of schools, she was running for lieutenant governor. But the NGA has been able to coalesce a big group of supporters on the national level saying that we're going to improve education.
Where's Barisi on this?
Barisi has pushed it all the way. And she ran statewide talking about local control, academic standards, accountability, and what she has brought in is this Common Core system. And Jeb Bush and his foundation out of Florida has been a big backer of this and still is. And they have had him in press conference with Mary Fallin and Janet Barisi. So you can follow Jeb Bush in this, too, and see
Well, not trying to make you a spokesman for all the candidates,
sure.
But Randy Brogdon has announced that he's going to run for governor. Do you know where he is on this?
Yes, I've had lunch with Randy, and he will definitely oppose Common Core.
But Mary Fallon's supporting it, though, correct?
Yes.
At the present time.
Yes,
right?
and she's continued to.
It's an interesting perspective because we normally don't see Republicans backing something. I wouldn't expect Republicans to back something like this, and that's why I'm really cautious about this, because I can't fathom why Mary Fallin would be for it, because it seems to go against the mindset of the Republican Party, in my opinion. And I'm just saying my opinion here. It goes against what I think of is what the party should stand for.
Exactly.
Well,
Am I making sense?
We'll even taking the party label off of it. Forget the Republicans, conservative people that believe in less government, local control. I mean, we're running out of time, but I'd like to, we won't have time to talk about this, but I was thinking we need people running for school boards that get it.
Yes, we do. And we do have school board elections coming up February 11th. If people will look into that in their local community, they need to see who's running, talk to them. Get on the Internet. You'll find plenty about Common Core. If you look at Owasso against Common Core, on Facebook, you'll find it, and you'll also find Sapulpa against Common Core, Broken Arrow against Common Core, Stop Common Core in Oklahoma. There are a number of places.
Right. We'll get to it. We'll talk
I have
more.
to give a plug. Don Crumey, Durant, Oklahoma, against Common Core.
And before I forget, Kimberly, who's here in the studios, stealthily hiding over there, not speaking on the radio. Kimberly Wheeler's having a town hall meeting Tuesday, January 14th at 6:30. Tuesday, January 14th at 6:30. That's next Tuesday, I believe, at the First Baptist Church of Sapulpa, which is 200 South Elm in Sapulpa. And you probably have to tell me how to get there, but I'll let y'all figure that out. JC knows how to get there. He probably goes out there a ways. No, it's in Creek County, isn't it? That's Creek County. That's not
I believe
ours.
so, yeah.
So, anyhow, that's Tuesday, January 14th at 6:30. First Baptist Church of Sapulpa. There'll be a town hall meeting out there as well. So, Steve, you got more questions?
You know, Linda, when the healthcare thing was happening, the thing that I always wondered about is why don't we try this in a small market first and see if it works?
Exactly.
Because it certainly didn't work in Massachusetts. It certainly didn't work in
Right.
Tennessee. It broke both of those systems. They went broke. So on Common Core, I'm wondering, has this been tried any place already? And if so, what were the results?
No, it has not. In fact, the standards themselves, just the goals or the standards that are in the classroom right now in our schools, English language arts and math is what we have in Common Core right now in Oklahoma. Those standards were written by panels that had only a couple of scholars that were educators at the end of the process, and they refused to sign off on them. Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who's at the University of Arkansas, was with the state of Massachusetts developing their Common Core standards, but theirs were academic. Now, this Common Core, this term Common Core has been around. It got hijacked. There was Dr. E.D. Hirsch. You may have heard of Core Knowledge. That's a set of standards that has been academic. So Common Core now in the hands of the National Governors Association has been rejected by all of the academic scholars that sat on the panel.
So it really
There are
ought to
only
be
a few.
It really ought to be called rotten to the core.
Exactly. It's rotten to the core. Absolutely.
You know, Kimberly and I were talking during the break also, and we touched on this a little bit, but given your background and our conversation, I want to touch it just again. What impact does this have on special needs kids and those that maybe are on the cusp there?
Right.
Well,
I'm a
needs help.
special ed teacher. I'm certified in learning disabled, mentally handicapped, and worked with students that are visually developmentally delayed in a specialized clinical setting for several years, traveled around the United States talking about vision and learning. So this is all about child development, skills, whether they have the skills. Is there some neurological impairment? Is there some developmental skill that's not in place? This system is devastating to special education. Students who need just mild degrees of help in the classroom with a support system, a little more time, a little more tutoring, a little more explanation on some issues, just from that level to a child that has very poor skills and some that will not even be what we used to call educable, that will not really learn to read because they've got some brain damage that they're not going to be able to, function in that area. They may have great skills in speaking or other areas, but there are different situations. You have to look at each child uniquely, and this is the opposite. There is no individuality here.
Another concern I have is, and we've done a couple of shows on this, the costs, the money going into the Tulsa public schools and the beyond abysmal results that they get.
Yes.
I've got to be concerned about the cost of
Absolutely.
implementing this. What's going to happen with the cost?
Well, our superintendent, Sandy Garrett, originally, who put this in place back before Janet Barisi, Sandy Garrett was the person who signed off on the grant along with Governor Brad Henry, and now Governor Fallon and State Superintendent Barisi have picked up the same program, gone with it. Barisi says that there is no additional cost, that this will cost nothing additional.
Just like Obamacare.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that
You'll save $2,500 a year.
That has become painfully, obviously, not true.
Right.
And we need technology we don't have. If we did this system, we didn't even have the technology to do the testing last year that broke down. And that should have been known in advance. The due diligence, talk about get your financials in order before you jump into a project. Right now, what we do know is this. There's a Pioneer Institute that estimated Oklahoma's cost would be $300 million. Now, that's just an estimate. We don't even know if that's close, but that's their estimate. We did just pass a contract. We didn't pass it, but the state school board was given an up or down vote. They were not able to look at all of the bidders, all of the vendors to make a decision. They had to approve or disapprove the contract for 5 years for $34.45 million for testing. And that is just 3rd through 8th grade for Common Core testing.
So is this all a foregone conclusion, or can people still have an impact and fight
We can
this?
have an impact, and that's why we're really doing this, the town hall meetings, to inform the public. But you can get on the computer without going to a town hall meeting. Look it up, Common Core, look up some of these organizations that we've just mentioned, and find out more about Common Core, because what we need to do is stop this in the state of Oklahoma. We have legislation that's been filed. One bill, I can tell you the number because I've read the language, and it's a good one. There may be others. This may get worked out in committees, but right now, Senate Bill 1146, filed by Senator Fields, who is a state senator in Oklahoma at the state capitol. His bill will stop the Common Core standards, curriculum, and testing. It's well worded.
Now, I got a question. I know some of the school board members from Tulsa Public Schools. I know two of them, as a matter of fact. Where do they stand on this?
And they still talk to you?
Occasionally. They may not even know
I'm
me anymore publicly. But where do they stand on this, and where does Dr. Keith Ballard stand on this? So I think I know where Dr. Ballard stands.
Well, I'll
but
start
let you
at the
tell us,
top,
if you will.
and Dr. Keith Ballard has taken recently a big grant, millions of dollars from the Gates Foundation. Gates is a major funder on the national level of Common Core. There are Common Core systems in place in Tulsa Public Schools now with computerized lessons. I know a couple of them that parents have given me the information on, and some teachers that have talked with me. So he's already into Common Core big time, and he's backing a candidate that will push Common Core in the state superintendent's race. So he's in. Now, under him on the state school or the Tulsa Public School Board, we have people that have pretty much gone along with what he wants, except in a couple of cases, I think, as far as curriculum and decisions like that are concerned. And I don't know how well informed they are. This is something that the people in Tulsa need to do, is talk with their school board members, find out, and the parents that are represented by them on the board are really the best people to talk with them and help them understand if they don't.
Now, is this something that has to be implemented legislatively, or is this something the school board can implement, the state school board can implement by themselves, administratively?
Well, it has already been put into state law. Unfortunately, here is the real good trick that the Obama administration did with the grant Race to the Top. When you applied for the grant, it required certain things to be put into place to compete.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
We did not get the money, but we competed, and we put into state law the Common Core.
You know, one thing I don't like about the politics these days is it's not about getting anything accomplished. It's just my team beating your team.
Right.
This is a Republican thing. This is a Democrat thing.
Yeah.
This shouldn't play into that. Politics shouldn't play into that. This really is. And I make jokes about, we do it all for the children. But this really is for the children.
Right.
And I think both commercial political parties need to, for once, actually focus on the children and quit trying to just make your team win and make the other team lose.
Very good. I agree. And on the top level, pushing this down and supporting it, it is bipartisan. It's bipartisan. It's corporate funded. It's foundation funded. And we're finding in Oklahoma that Kim is with me today. Kimberly, she is a Democrat. I'm a Republican. We don't care what party you are. We want you to register to vote. Tell your friends and neighbors and family and everyone that you can influence to look into this, tell them what it is, because it's a top-down control of our children.
I'm perplexed as to why so many Republicans are backing this thing. I still cannot figure that out for the life of me.
Well, I think what got people's attention was when Huckabee came out for it. I think that may have done the most to bring it to a lot of Republicans' attention, because wait, this guy's for this? It threw a lot of people.
But I can't figure out why our governor would be for it either.
Well, I think it can't hold. I think as long as we have people waking up across the state before it's locked into place, then we will get it pushed back. Even though she is for it at this time, I think she'll have to turn.
You know, the late Labor Commissioner Brenda Renault used to say, when people change their mind, a politician changes his or her mind, you don't know whether they've seen the light or felt the heat.
Exactly.
And
I
really
served with Brenda Renault. I don't know if I put that on my resume there, but I was Deputy Commissioner of Labor under Brenda Renault after I was in Keating's office, yes.
It's all very, very interesting topic, and it's controversial to say the least, but the question is, we're fighting an uphill battle, I realize at this point. If it's already in the legislation, if Kathy Taylor helped put it in place when she was working down in Oklahoma City with Brad Henry and company, I know a few years back, and I have to wonder about it, and it seems like Tulsa Public Schools is leading the charge, at least in this area. And
yes.
OEA, NEA seems to be the ones that have the most to gain from this. And the students, to me, look like the true losers in this whole scenario.
Exactly.
I mean, forgive me if I'm oversimplifying it, but that's what it looks like
No, the
to me.
students in our society
Right.
will lose.
Right. I'm inclined to agree with you on that. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. I want to thank Linda Murphy for coming in to talk to us. I want to remind you of the town hall meetings we've got coming up, a couple of them, Tuesday, January 14th at 6:30, First Baptist Church in Sapulpa, and then Tuesday, January 28th at 7 o'clock. And this is going to be at Oklahoma Wesleyan, is that correct?
Yes.
This one is? Okay. Thank you very much for coming in, Linda. I appreciate it very much. You've been a great guest. And I'll remind you before I forget of our free book. You can get it from us by Glenn Beck, Control, Exposing the Truth About Guns, plus information about the town hall meetings. It's all free. Just give me a call at 918-398-8387. That's 918-398-8387. Thank you very much for listening.